What began as a routine archival review spiraled into a royal nightmare. Behind a mahogany drawer, tucked away with eerie precision, lay an envelope marked only with a crest. Camilla's. What Catherine found inside didn't just shake her, it shattered the very foundations of trust inside the palace. What was Camilla hiding, and why now? Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine's discovery didn't happen during an official review or a strategic search. It was purely accidental, or so it seemed. While overseeing some historical letters meant for a heritage project, she opened a drawer seldom touched since Queen Elizabeth's passing. In it, hidden under aged documents and pressed floral tributes, sat a freshly sealed envelope unmistakably marked with Queen Camilla's private crest. Not the standard royal seal used for formal communication, but her personal one used only for deeply private, highly sensitive exchanges within the family. The envelope had no date, no name, no indication of its intended reader, just that chillingly pristine emblem. Out of instinct or perhaps intuition, Catherine opened it. Staff later said they saw the colour drain from her face, her hand gripping the edge of the antique table for balance, as if the very ground beneath her had shifted. Whatever was inside, it wasn't protocol, it wasn't policy, it was personal, and it wasn't meant for her eyes. The document, meticulously typed and laced with Camilla's unmistakable phrasing, read like a strategy blueprint rather than a letter. There was no warmth, no pretense of sentiment, just cold, calculated intent. The tone was clinical, precise, laced with undertones that struck Catherine like daggers. There was mention of restoring appropriate legacy alignments and modern relevance management phrases that barely veiled their true purpose. This wasn't about preserving tradition. It was about re-engineering the monarchy's future in Camilla's image. And as the Princess of Wales read on, she realized that the target of these plans wasn't the crown itself but her. It was no coincidence that she was the one to find it. No accident that it had been stored so close to her work area. Someone had placed it there to be found. Or worse, someone had tried to hide it within reach, hoping she wouldn't. But she had. And in that moment, Catherine knew this was not the beginning of a policy dispute. This was the beginning of a war for influence, legacy, and ultimately, control. But what exactly did the document contain? And why would Queen Camilla risk such explosive words in writing? The next section opens the sealed secrets. It wasn't a letter, it was a manifesto. Meticulously structured, Queen Camilla's secret document revealed not mere opinions but a master plan, a long game for consolidating royal influence, bypassing traditional lines, and even adjusting succession optics. Catherine wasn't just blindsided, she was betrayed. What lay beneath Camilla's crisp and cold writing was not casual commentary. It was a carefully calculated blueprint to rewire the monarchy from the inside out. The document began with a tone of concern, speaking vaguely about the shifting tides of public engagement and the need for stability over sentiment. But as Catherine read deeper, it was no longer dressed in polite euphemisms. Camilla's strategy was crystal clear: take over influence in key charitable sectors, especially the ones that Catherine had passionately built from the ground up. There were explicit outlines for reassignment of senior patronages, some that had been Diana's, others that were Catherine's own. These would, under Camilla's recommendations, be redistributed for institutional neutrality. But the language was a veil. Neutrality was not the goal Dominion was. Even more chilling was the section targeting the monarchy's modernization efforts. For years, William and Catherine had championed transparency, mental health awareness, and a refreshed image of the royal family. But Camilla's words dismissed those initiatives as idealistic theatrics, arguing they diluted the gravitas of the crown. Her proposal? A silent but structured withdrawal of support from these causes, and with it, a careful replacement plan installing royal surrogates who would toe Camilla's more conservative line. Catherine's stomach turned when she read the phrase retraining the narrative strength of the next generation. It was a direct reference to her children, and possibly to herself and William. The notion that Camilla viewed them as politically malleable, and that she was actively strategizing their media recalibration was more than offensive. It was war. But perhaps the deepest cut came in the section labeled Legacy Optimization. It called for a measured step back from Diana-focused commemorations, suggesting they overshadowed the unity of the current royal household. Camilla wrote, without hesitation, that the public's obsession with Diana needed to be redirected. She recommended that historic romanticism be balanced with present-day stewardship, a clinical phrase that masked a ruthless truth. Diana's memory, the very pillar of Catherine's public compassion, was being erased strategically, coldly, and without remorse. Catherine's hands trembled as she absorbed the final paragraphs. A reference to her as emotionally volatile and currently unsuited for decisive optics stung with deliberate cruelty. It wasn't just an attack on her role, it was an attack on her person. Camilla had framed her grace and empathy as liabilities, her emotional intelligence as a threat to institutional power. And buried near the end, an ominous phrase emerged like a shadow over the future. Initiate Phase 1 of the Windsor recalibration plan. Whatever that meant, it was already in motion. And Catherine, unknowingly, was already caught in its web. But how did Camilla craft such a dangerous document without detection? And who else was involved? What Catherine uncovered next tore open another layer of royal duplicity. Catherine wasn't just reading Camilla's words, she was reading names, allies, enablers. Within the walls of the palace where loyalty was meant to be sacred, Catherine now saw a network. Familiar names, some too close for comfort. The deeper she went into the pages of Camilla's carefully veiled scheme, the colder the air around her seemed to grow. What began as a painful strategy laid out in black and white had now mutated into something far more sinister, a web of cooperation. This wasn't a solo ambition. Camilla had quietly assembled a faction, a collection of voices, some long-standing, some newly planted, who were orchestrating her vision from the shadows. Names of advisors who once sat beside Charles in strategy meetings now appeared as authors of footnotes and comments, marked with initials that Catherine instantly recognized. But what shattered her was the presence of one in particular, a former aide from Kensington Palace. Someone who had once helped draft her speeches, scheduled her children's public appearances, and shared tea with her in between public tours. This wasn't just betrayal, it was infiltration. That aide, as the document described, had transitioned to a more aligned environment. The language was cold and mechanical, but the meaning was brutal. Someone Catherine had trusted implicitly was now part of Camilla's inner circle. The realization landed like a punch to the chest. Then came the omission that made everything worse. William's name, absent. Not a single reference to his role, not even as a passive figure. In a plan that dissected nearly every corner of the monarchy's present and future, the heir to the throne had been scrubbed out. Deliberately, unmistakably. Catherine wasn't just being undermined, William was being erased. And with him, the future they had been tirelessly working to build. It was in that moment that Catherine began to understand the full scope of the operation. This wasn't about titles or media campaigns, it was about seizing control of the narrative itself. One of the most disturbing revelations came in a note from a high-ranking communications director, someone Catherine had previously sat beside during press briefings. They had been instructed to reshape public engagement metrics in a way that diminished the younger royals' visibility. Not through absence, but through reframing subtle shifts in tone. Framing of photographs, intentional word choices that would, over time, recast Catherine and William as out of touch or ineffective. These were not random critiques, this was planned erosion. Even more damning were the media connections. Two editors of prominent publications, both long suspected of favoring Camilla's image, were referenced with subtle indicators of cooperation. One entry read simply, Editor A on board, ready for soft roll execution post Q1. The second was more chilling, confirmed editorial discretion secured for planned re-evaluation of public figure priorities. Catherine didn't need to read between the lines. She was the public figure being deprioritized. And Camilla's campaign to recalibrate public loyalty was already underway, disguised as natural shifts in public interest, when in truth it was an orchestrated smear, Surrounded by names she once trusted, seeing allies now serving another purpose, Catherine felt the palace walls close in. The corridors she once walked with confidence now echoed with suspicion. One staff member, who witnessed Catherine in the aftermath, described her silence as louder than any scream. She wasn't just hurt, she was isolated, and she knew the true danger hadn't even begun yet. And yet, the most painful betrayal was still to come, not in writing, but in whispers. Whispers from someone Catherine trusted with her soul. One name changed everything. When Catherine traced how the document had moved from Camilla's hands to a locked drawer near her own workspace, only one person had the access. Only one person knew where to hide it. And that person was family. It began as a quiet inquiry, a desperate need to understand how such a damning document, so intimately tied to Camilla, had landed mere steps from Catherine's private writing desk. The palace was vast, segmented by ranks of security and protocol, and yet somehow this manifesto had slipped through all of it undetected. But it hadn't truly slipped, it had been placed. Placed by someone who had both the clearance and the discretion to avoid raising alarms. Someone who knew exactly when the room would be empty. Someone who understood Catherine's routines, her habits, even her preferred order of review. The list of possibilities was short, and then it narrowed to one. The name was almost too painful to say aloud. This was not an enemy or a rival, it was someone from inside, William and Catherine's most protected circle. Someone she had trusted, celebrated with, and once referred to as part of the family. But resentment, it seemed, had been simmering quietly beneath the surface. Sources close to the staff revealed that the individual had grown increasingly bitter after a recent reshuffling of duties, feeling sidelined, underappreciated, and passed over in favor of younger, newer recruits. It was that personal dissatisfaction that Camilla had allegedly preyed upon, with whispers of future access, elevated status, and, most of all, stability. She'd extended an olive branch draped in ambition. The betrayal wasn't in the act alone, it was in the intention. Catherine realized this wasn't someone who had simply made a mistake or been manipulated in a moment of weakness. This was someone who chose ambition over allegiance, secrecy over solidarity. When the truth became undeniable, it broke her. This wasn't about a political strategy or a public fallout. This was about trust. Trust so deeply rooted that its destruction felt like losing a part of herself. Catherine's emotional breakdown wasn't dramatic, it was devastating. A staffer found her in a corridor rarely used by senior royals, slumped silently against the wall, face buried in her hands. The moment she was spotted, protocol kicked in, security was called, doors were locked. Communications were blacked out temporarily as rumors surged internally, staff racing to understand whether a physical threat had emerged. But the real danger wasn't external, it had always been within. The palace issued no comment when whispers of the leak spread among insiders, but behind closed doors, fear tightened its grip. Loyalty, once assumed, was now questioned at every level. The hierarchy of trust had collapsed. For decades, the royal family had relied on discretion and unity, but now even their own could not be counted on. One insider later said, "It was like watching a bloodline rupture in real time." The Queen's document had ignited a fire, but the betrayal by someone Catherine held dear poured gasoline on the flames. With the betrayal confirmed, the next step wasn't damage control, it was confrontation. But Catherine didn't go to Charles, or even William first. She went straight to Camilla. Behind closed doors, the Queen Consort and the Princess of Wales stood face to face. No staff, no cameras. What passed between them remains shrouded in whispers, but one thing was clear, Catherine didn't just confront Camilla. She challenged the very throne she would one day inherit. The confrontation was not arranged, it was not scheduled through secretaries or staged in the presence of intermediaries. It happened because Catherine could no longer carry the weight of silence. She entered the green drawing room not as a duchess seeking explanation, but as a future queen demanding answers. Camilla had been there already, alone, reviewing briefing notes for a public event that would never happen. The door closed behind Catherine, not slammed, but with deliberate finality. Palace aides, sensing the collision about to unfold, stepped back and said nothing. They knew this wasn't a conversation, it was a reckoning. No royal handbook could have prepared Camilla for the fury she faced. Catherine, always composed, always diplomatic, was visibly trembling not from fear, but from restraint. Her voice, usually soft and tempered, came with an edge sharp enough to cut through royal steel. She demanded to know why the document existed, why her work, her identity, her family were being quietly undermined, why Camilla would orchestrate something so sinister, so divisive, beneath the palace roof. Camilla didn't flinch. She didn't deny it. In fact, according to a senior source who later heard about the exchange, Camilla's response was chillingly cold. "I do what's necessary," she reportedly said, without an ounce of remorse. That phrase ignited something in Catherine. She laid it out plainly. If this wasn't walked back, if an apology wasn't issued, if the internal campaign wasn't stopped, she would go to Charles. Not as a daughter-in-law pleading for fairness, but as a royal partner demanding integrity. She threatened to bring it to the royal council, to shine a light on everything Camilla had tried to bury. And then, in a moment that shifted the power dynamic forever, Camilla issued a warning. Calm, unblinking, dangerous. "You're not as protected as you think." Those words froze the room. It was not a threat. It was a promise wrapped in velvet. Camilla had always played the long game, and this time she wasn't going to blink first. What followed was a silence more deafening than any argument. No one spoke of the meeting officially, but the aftermath was undeniable. Public appearances were abruptly cancelled. Smiles disappeared from balcony waves. Internal communications tightened. For days, senior royals vanished from sight, huddled in private quarters as speculation bubbled outside the gates. Monumental had shifted, and the walls of the palace could feel it. But as royal corridors filled with silence, Charles was forced to act, and his decision stunned the entire monarchy. King Charles was thrust into a storm of palace intrigue. Two women he deeply valued were on the brink of a silent war. As monarch, his role was to stabilize. As husband and father-in-law, his loyalties were exposed. What he did next would either unify the crown or ignite a silent civil war within its gates. Catherine didn't wait for intermediaries. The very next morning, she walked the halls of Clarence House with the document in hand, her steps measured but unstoppable. She delivered it to Charles herself, no aides, no press secretary, no waiting for discretion. What she handed him wasn't just paper. It was proof. Proof of betrayal. Proof of manipulation. Proof that the woman he had trusted to stand beside him as queen was orchestrating a vision of monarchy that systematically dismantled the legacy of Diana and the promise of the next generation. Charles read it once, and then again, this time in silence so dense that even the ticking of the ornate clock beside him seemed to pause. When he finally spoke, it wasn't with denial, it was with heartbreak. He reportedly looked up at Catherine and said, "She's endangering everything we've tried to protect." The tension that followed could not be contained. Within hours, Charles called a private council, not the ceremonial kind lined with velvet chairs and cameras, but a discreet gathering of his most trusted advisors. Camilla was not invited. That decision alone sent a message louder than any public decree. Behind closed doors, the monarch asked hard questions. How far had the Windsor recalibration plan progressed? Who had approved its messaging strategy? What influence had Camilla exerted over the palace's communication arm? The answers were worse than expected. The plan wasn't theoretical, it was operational. Subtle changes in messaging, speech language, and visual framing had already been rolled out. Charles felt blindsided, not just as a king, but as a father. In an emergency executive order, Charles halted all components of the recalibration project. Every scheduled initiative linked to the plan was frozen. Departments were told to pause, review, and report. Staff were warned that leaks would trigger immediate disciplinary action. And yet, despite the chaos, Charles refused to issue a public statement. He knew that if the public caught wind of a rift at the heart of the monarchy, especially one pitting his queen against his daughter-in-law, it could fracture the delicate trust that had only just begun to mend after years of turbulence. He feared not only the headlines, but the ripple effect it could have on Commonwealth ties, press alliances, and even investor confidence in royal-backed charities. Silence, for now, was his shield. But that silence came at a cost. The sudden cancellation of several high-profile engagements raised eyebrows. Public appearances were wiped from calendars, charity events were postponed without explanation. William and Catherine remained out of sight. Camilla appeared only once briefly, solemnly at a private luncheon, her expression unreadable. Inside the palace, the air was thick with whispers. Senior staff avoided eye contact. Long-time advisors tiptoed around topics that just days ago were routine. Something was unraveling. And no matter how tightly the gates were shut, the pressure building inside those ancient walls was impossible to contain. But what began as an internal crisis was about to explode beyond the gates. Because someone leaked the story to the press. It started with a whisper on social media, then came the headlines. Secret document shakes monarchy. Suddenly, the entire nation was watching. The palace's darkest hour had gone public, and Catherine, she was now the center of a global firestorm. No one expected the leak to happen that fast. At first, it was just a cryptic post from a fringe royal gossip account, barely a blip on the radar. But within hours, screenshots of the alleged manifesto were making rounds on encrypted group chats, anonymous Twitter threads, and private journalist circles. Then came the tabloid bombshells. Queen Camilla's secret plot exposed. Catherine breaks down after betrayal. Is the monarchy at war with itself? What was once a palace-contained scandal had burst into the public domain, igniting a frenzy that neither Buckingham's crisis team nor the press office could contain. The media descended like wolves. Satellite trucks circled Kensington. Every whisper was amplified, every silence interpreted. Public opinion fractured like glass. Online, the digital world was ablaze. #Team Catherine began trending across the UK and even overseas. Social media users flooded timelines with messages of support for the Princess of Wales, demanding justice, answers, and above all, truth. But not everyone rallied behind her. Tabloids with historic ties to Camilla launched their own counter-narrative, pushing #ProtectTheCrown and framing the leak as an overreaction to internal strategy. Headlines grew harsher. Emotional instability or calculated move, princess or politician. The same playbook Catherine had read in Camilla's document was now being deployed against her in real time. Then came the photos. Paparazzi, tipped off by an anonymous source, captured Catherine leaving the palace in a visibly emotional state, her eyes red, expression drawn. The images were plastered across front pages by morning. The woman who had carried the modern monarchy with poise and grace was now depicted as fragile, broken, defeated. And in contrast, Camilla was nowhere to be seen. Not a word, not a gesture. The Queen Consort remained out of sight, her silence louder than any press statement. The palace issued a cold, scripted no comment, no denial, no explanation. Just silence, calculated, eerie, and suffocating. Under pressure, William emerged briefly. During a tightly controlled event, he addressed reporters with a vague statement about family unity and navigating difficult times together. His voice was firm, but his words were hollow. The press wasn't interested in unity. They wanted chaos, and they got it. Within 48 hours, protesters began appearing outside Windsor, holding signs that read "The people deserve the truth and stop the palace games." Some were peaceful, others more aggressive, demanding full disclosure and threatening to disrupt royal appearances unless transparency was delivered. The monarchy was no longer insulated. The walls had been breached. The firestorm showed no signs of slowing. News channels aired speculative specials. Talk shows debated Catherine's mental health. Anonymous sources sold snippets of supposed conversations. Trust in the institution faltered, not because of the document itself, but because of the silence that followed it. A silence that reeked of guilt, of cover-up, of fear. And while the world chased headlines, while hashtags fought for dominance, while the crown scrambled to contain the fallout, something even darker was being overlooked. Because buried in that same drawer where Catherine had found the document, there were more pages. Pages that hadn't been shown to Charles yet. But while the nation focused on drama, something darker was unfolding behind the scenes. The document had more pages, pages that hadn't been shown to Charles yet. Everyone thought the worst was over. But the final pages of Camilla's document had been tucked into a second envelope, discovered only after Catherine demanded a deeper search. What they revealed made the first draft look tame. This wasn't just about legacy, it was about succession itself. Buried in a locked drawer beneath seemingly irrelevant files, the second envelope was far smaller, but far more lethal. Unlike the first, this one had no monogram, no title page, no polite preface. It was raw, strategic, and unfiltered. What Catherine read stunned her into silence. These weren't notes about shifting public perception or legacy symbolism. This was a blueprint to manipulate the very order of royal succession through narrative control. The proposal didn't call for legal reforms or parliamentary lobbying. Instead, it advocated for a subtle reframing campaign, one that would, over time, erode the public's expectation of William and Catherine's eventual ascension. It suggested elevating non-traditional heirs into more prominent roles, using selective exposure and media control to present them as natural, stable, and deserving. In short, it was a plot to reshape the future of the monarchy without ever rewriting the law. But it went further, much further. The notes detailed a plan to shift Catherine into what was chillingly referred to as a purely ceremonial role. While publicly praised and celebrated, she would, behind the scenes, be quietly distanced from major decisions, advisory councils, and future planning. Her influence would be hollowed out, while her image remained intact, maintaining public calm, while real power moved elsewhere. It was a plan straight from the shadows, built on manipulation, not confrontation. And the language used to justify it was even more disturbing. One section proposed leveraging health-related limitations, emotional fatigue, and institutional continuity as tools to justify this shift. Another openly discussed the use of public sympathy to drive a narrative transition, suggesting that with enough media shaping, the public could be guided to accept a new vision of the Crown's future, without ever realizing what they had lost. But it was one line buried at the bottom of the final page that turned this from cold strategy into open sabotage: control perception, and you control history. That phrase, so blunt, so absolute, revealed the real weapon in play: public belief. Camilla didn't need to dethrone Catherine by force. She only needed to slowly change what the public saw, what they expected, and what they were willing to accept. It was a betrayal not just of Catherine, but of the monarchy's very soul. When these final pages were shown to Charles, something in him reportedly snapped. No longer was this a matter of internal disagreement or private misjudgment. It was a coordinated effort to destabilize his son's future and rewrite the very essence of royal continuity. Witnesses say Charles slammed the document down and said through clenched teeth, "This goes beyond strategy. This is sabotage." He had been blindsided by the woman he had elevated, trusted, and defended for decades. And now she was dismantling everything he thought he was preserving. With the monarchy's very future now in question, a secret council was summoned, and for the first time in decades the word abdication returned to royal vocabulary. Behind triple-locked doors, a gathering unseen since the days of crisis was held. Senior royals, select aides, and even legal counsel. The topic? Whether the Queen Consort's role should be revised or even removed. At the center of it all, Catherine sat silently, holding the document that changed everything. It was not a meeting born out of routine or tradition. It was summoned out of necessity, triggered by the discovery that had set the monarchy ablaze from within. The names invited made it clear this was no symbolic consultation. Prince Edward, stoic and always cautious, sat beside Princess Anne, whose loyalty to the crown was only rivaled by her intolerance for betrayal. Two archbishops were also called in not to pray, but to advise on the constitutional consequences of what was now being whispered behind velvet-lined doors, the potential dethroning of a queen consort. The mood was not one of panic, but of sobering clarity. The monarchy had reached a fork in the road. One path led to reform, the other to collapse. Every person in that room knew the weight of what was at stake. Charles was present, but not in control. For the first time since wearing the crown, he sat not as a sovereign, but as a man torn between personal loyalty and national duty. On one side was the woman he had waited a lifetime to legitimize. On the other, the future of the institution he had sworn to protect. He did not speak often. His silence, according to one witness, was more haunting than any argument. When asked directly whether Camilla's public engagement should be paused, he reportedly stared into the table for a long moment before saying, "I don't know anymore." That admission, bare, unguarded, hung in the room like smoke. Camilla, for her part, refused to attend. Instead, she issued what aides described as a private statement of dismay, expressing that she was shocked and hurt by the accusations and that her intent had been misunderstood. But few in that chamber believed it. The evidence was too detailed, too deliberate. And when Catherine was asked to speak, she didn't deliver an emotional tirade or a political speech. She simply read from the pages, word for word, every line that painted her as expendable, every sentence that suggested William be bypassed, every tactic outlined to rewrite the royal future behind closed doors. Her voice cracked only once, when she paused on the phrase, "a purely ceremonial role." In that moment, even the archbishops lowered their gaze. The emotional weight of what she had endured quietly alone shattered any lingering illusions about Camilla's motives. The outcome was not made public. It never would be, not entirely. But decisions were made. Camilla's calendar was quietly cleared of several prominent appearances. Legacy institutions she once oversaw were suddenly reassigned. A new advisory group was formed, one that reported directly to Charles and William. The palace never issued a formal explanation. Instead, the changes came slowly through 1,000 small shifts, like a crown being adjusted without anyone seeing the hand that moved it. And as the monarchy began its quiet recalibration, the public was left to piece together fragments of a crisis they would never be allowed to fully understand. As the royal family steps into a new era marked by betrayal and reckoning, one question echoes through the halls of power: can trust ever return once a crown has been cracked from within? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.